The fluorescent lights of the hospital flickered softly above Nina's head. She sat still, her arm outstretched, warm blood slipping silently through the thin plastic tube. Each drop was a quiet promise, a gift, a vow. Nina Washington wasn't new to donating. She'd done it 3 times before, ever since nursing school instilled in her that 1 pint could save 3 lives. But today, something felt different. Her heartbeat was louder. Her hand clenched a little tighter. The nurse even looked at her twice, like she knew something Nina didn't. She glanced down at the blood bag, now half full, and whispered under her breath, "Wherever you're going, make it count." Dramatic pause, because Nina had no idea who she was saving. The patient was in critical condition. No name, no family, no backstory. Just a chart number, a rare blood type, and an urgent request. Nina was the only match, the only hope. She walked out of that blood center that day with a bandage on her arm, and a strange heaviness in her chest. What oath had she taken? The one in nursing school, or something deeper older, something rooted in the soul? The wind picked up as she stepped outside, the sun disappearing behind dark clouds. She should have known that the blood she gave wouldn't just save a life, it would rewrite hers. The hospital cafeteria buzzed with soft gossip and the clinking of metal trays. Nina sat alone at a corner table, her chicken salad untouched. Conversations floated past her like steam from untouched coffee cups. They say the patient came in with no ID. ICU's locked down tighter than Fort Knox. Only thing we know. Male, young, blood type, like finding a unicorn. Nina's eyes twitched. She didn't speak. But her ears, though, they were wide open. A resident nurse passed by, lowering her voice like she was spilling state secrets. I heard his body went into shock. If it wasn't for that last-minute blood match, he'd be gone. That last-minute match was her. She felt her pulse in her neck. She remembered the look on the head nurse's face when she'd been told. Her blood was the only available match within 50 miles. The urgency, the way the supervisor mumbled, were cutting it close. Still, something didn't sit right now. Name no visitors, no police, no noise, just silence. Hospitals usually hum with protocol and paper trails, but this felt like a vanishing act in real time. She took a breath, stood up, and tossed her salad untouched into the bin. As she turned to leave, a janitor, Mr. Ellis, kind but always observant, looked at her and said softly, "Careful where you poke." "Nina, some stories in this place don't want to be found." She froze. His eyes told her he wasn't kidding, but something inside her stirred. A need, not just to know who she saved, but to understand why it felt like fate. Because sometimes the patient isn't the only one who needed saving. That night, Nina couldn't sleep. The rain tapped against her apartment windows like a persistent knock from a memory long forgotten. She lay in bed, wrapped in silence, heart full of questions. The mystery patient haunted her not with fear, but with familiarity. At 2:17 a.m., she gave up the fight. She padded barefoot to the linen closet, reaching high for a box labeled Mama's Things. The edges were dusty, the cardboard soft from time. She hadn't opened it since her mother passed 5 years ago. Inside, scarves scented with jasmine oil, a locket with a tiny photo of Nina as a baby, and a worn leather diary. She sat on the living room floor, cradling it like an heirloom. The first page was smudged, written in her mother's strong cursive. "Some truths I buried to protect what little peace I had left. But baby girl, blood always finds its way." Her breath caught in her throat. Nina turned page after page about her own birth, about her brother Devin, about their father, and then a pause. The tone changed. The date skipped. A new name scribbled in the margins. XX, who was X. The diary didn't say more, but her mother's words were clear. There had been something hidden, a missing piece. A thread left dangling outside. Thunder rolled across the sky. Nina clutched the diary and whispered, "Mama, what did you do?" Somehow, she knew. The answers she wanted about that stranger in the hospital. They didn't begin in room 406. They began in this book. And this book was about to bleed. Let's keep going. The storm is building. Devin Washington pulled into Nina's driveway like a storm on four wheels. Midnight black Dodge Charger, engine rumbling like distant thunder. He hadn't called. He never did. Nina saw him through the window and sighed, already bracing herself for the emotional wreckage. He always carried with him. He knocked twice sharp, impatient. Same way he used to as a kid when he forgot his keys and came home smelling like smoke and bad choices. She opened the door. Silence stretched between them like rope, tight, fraying. "You reading it, ain't you?" he asked without hello. His eyes flicked toward the diary in her hand. Nina didn't answer. She didn't have to. Devin ran a hand over his clean-shaven head and let out a breath that trembled. "I told her to burn that damn thing. Said it would only bring pain. But Mama never did know how to let go of ghosts." "You knew," Nina said, voice low. "You knew there was more." Devin stepped in, pacing, restless, like the truth made his skin itch. "Look, not everything got to come out the grave, Nini. Some things better left in the dirt. But not this," she snapped. "Not when it might involve someone I just saved." He froze. "What you mean? Someone you saved?" Nina told him about the blood donation, the mystery patient, the strange connection she couldn't shake. And as she spoke, Devin's jaw tightened, his eyes going hollow. "I'm telling you now," he said, voice raw. "Whatever's pulling you into this, it won't end how you think. Truth don't fix things. It breaks them." But Nina had made her choice. Family ties. They weren't always bonds. Sometimes they were chains. Nina stood in the hospital archive room, surrounded by folders thick with people's pain and paper trails of salvation. But one file, one folder, was sealed tighter than the rest. With the help of her old friend Mariah, a nurse supervisor with a badge and loose morals, she got her hands on it. The mystery patient, male, age 30, recovered rapidly after the transfusion. No emergency contact. Adopted. And the kicker, a handwritten note from the attending physician. Only one viable donor in state. Donor, Nina Washington. She blinked. The coincidence clawed at her ribs. Mariah leaned over her shoulder. "Girl, that's more than a match. That's a mirror." Nina's hands trembled as she flipped the page. There it was, a copy of the consent form she'd signed, and attached confidential genetic screening data, blood markers, antigens, a faint red stamp, familial compatibility noted, not a coincidence. This wasn't just about giving blood. This was about giving it to family. A tremor moved through her. Her mother's diary, the name X, the secrets, Devin's evasiveness. They were all pointing in the same direction. She stared at the name on the form. Xavier Miles. Born in Georgia. Adopted at age 2. And just like that, the man she'd saved was her half-brother. Nina sat on the edge of her bed, her phone in one hand and the file in the other. Her walls felt like they were closing in photos of her childhood. Her nursing degree, her mother's smile, all staring back with new meaning. Her whole life had been curated, clean, controlled. Until now. She called Devin. No answer. Again, no answer. Third try he picked up. "You saw his name, didn't you?" he whispered. "You knew," she said. "All this time, you knew there was someone else. Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want to believe it. Thought maybe, if I left it buried, it wouldn't become real." He sighed. "Mama made me swear. Said she couldn't handle losing you too." Nina closed her eyes. But we lost each other anyway. The next morning, she returned to the hospital. She needed to see him, to see Xavier with her own eyes. But the nurse at the desk gave her a strange look. "He's been discharged." "What?" "When this morning, signed himself out. Said he felt fine." Just like that, he was gone. But not for long, because fate wasn't done with them yet. Xavier Miles adjusted his cufflinks in the mirror of his high-rise office. Sleek charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, impeccable, like his life, orderly, precise, no clutter. That's how he liked it, except lately. Something was off. Ever since waking up in that hospital bed, he'd been haunted by dreams. A woman's voice he couldn't place. The scent of jasmine. A diary with no pages, and a name. Nina. He remembered flashes. her voice beside his hospital bed. He didn't open his eyes, but he felt something familiar. His assistant interrupted the silence. "Mr. Miles, a courier dropped this off for you." Xavier opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, no return address, just a line of handwriting that stopped his breath cold. "You were never supposed to disappear. We never stopped looking." Attached, a photograph. A woman holding a baby. A face he didn't recognize but felt deep in his bones. He dropped into his leather chair, heart racing. He didn't know who sent it, but he knew exactly who he needed to find. Nina stared at her phone for what felt like hours. Should she call him? Should she leave it alone? Would reaching out destroy the life he thought he knew? Or was staying quiet just another lie? Devon's words echoed. "Truth don't fix things, it breaks." And she looked out at the city lights below her apartment balcony. Somewhere out there, her blood brother walked, with no idea who he truly was, what connected them, what had been lost, and maybe could still be found. She opened the diary again. Her mother had written about love, about shame, about silence that stretched a long dot, and somewhere in the middle of those pages, one entry stood out. "I had to let him go, but I prayed one day they'd find each other." Tears welled up. She whispered, "Mama, we found each other. What do I do now?" Suddenly, a soft ding from her phone. Unknown number. One message. "We need to talk, Xavier." Her world froze. He'd found her first. The ringtone sliced through the quiet, like a blade. Nina hesitated. Her thumb hovered over the green button. Heart thudding so loud it drowned out her thoughts. She answered. "Hello." The voice on the other end was calm, deep, deliberate. "Nina." She swallowed. Xavier, silence, tense, thick with history. Neither of them remembered, but both of them felt. "I got a letter," he said. "A picture, your name, and I think you saved my life." She nodded slowly, though he couldn't see. I did. Another pause. "Who are you to me?" And just like that, the line between strangers and siblings blurred. She told him everything. The donation, the file, the diary, their mother, their father, Devon. She kept her voice steady, though inside she was unraveling. Xavier didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he said, "I don't know what to feel right now, but I need to see you. In person," she whispered. "Okay." Because some calls don't end in goodbyes. They begin a new bloodline. They met at a quiet coffee shop on Jefferson Avenue, far from the glare of hospitals, courtrooms, and old ghosts. Nina arrived first. Nervous, clutching the diary like armor, Xavier walked in tall, poised, but with something in his eyes that betrayed the storm inside. He scanned the room and locked eyes with her. And just like that, something clicked. Not recognition, not yet, but connection. He sat. No handshakes, no smiles. "I don't even drink coffee," he said. "But I didn't know where else to do this." She smiled faintly. "Neither did I." She slid the diary across the table. "It's all in there, or most of it." He opened it, touched the pages like they were sacred. "I've spent my whole life wondering why I felt like something was missing," he said, voice low. "I thought it was adoption, maybe trauma. But now, this changes everything." Nina reached out, barely touching his hand. "You're not alone anymore." Tears welled in his eyes, but didn't fall. "I want to know who I am, who we are." And right there, amid strangers sipping lattes and scrolling phones, a brother and sister met again. For the first time, Xavier couldn't sleep. That night after meeting Nina, he sat alone in his apartment, the diary open on his coffee table, flickering TV casting shadows across old pages. His mind raced through everything Nina's calm strength. The truth about his blood, the name of a man he never met, their father. He poured a glass of bourbon but didn't drink it. Instead, he opened his safe. Inside, documents from his adoption, court files, photographs, and something else. A small velvet pouch he'd never noticed before, tucked behind an old tax form. He opened it. A folded letter, aged and yellowing. The handwriting delicate, deliberate. "To my little boy, if this ever reaches you, it means the world spun the right way again." Signed, Mama Rose. His hands trembled. He didn't recognize the name, but the letter spoke of lullabies, of rocking chairs, of a hot Georgia sun, of a boy taken too soon, and of promises made by people who thought they were protecting him, but were really protecting themselves. He read every word twice, then a third time. At the end, she wrote, "Your name was never supposed to disappear. One day, you'll feel the pull-in when you do. Look for the girl with eyes like midnight. She holds the rest of you." He picked up his phone, typed fast, sent it to Nina. "Do you know someone named Mama Rose?" The typing dots on her end appeared, then disappeared. 5 minutes later, she replied, "I think you just opened a door we were never meant to walk through alone. Because sometimes, letters don't just tell stories, they break spells. A photograph never lies, but it never tells the whole truth either." The photograph was buried in the back of Nina's mother's jewelry box, tucked behind dried rose petals and a faded church fan. It slipped out when Nina tipped the box sideways, just a single snapshot, aged and curling at the edges. But it hit like a gut punch. A woman, standing on a wooden porch with peeling white paint, holding a baby wrapped in a green crochet blanket. The woman's face was soft but firm, beautiful but weathered eyes heavy with a story she never told. And beside her, arm resting on the porch rail, was a man, their father. But the woman wasn't. Nina's mother. Nina stared at it for minutes before realizing she was holding her breath. "Who are you?" she whispered to the photo, and more importantly, who was the child? She rushed to Xavier's apartment that evening. He answered in sweatpants and confusion, but when she handed him the photo, his face changed. He sat down, hard, like the floor had tilted beneath him. "I've seen her," he said, voice nearly inaudible. "In my dreams, I thought it was imagination." Nina sat beside him. "That's not just any woman. That's someone. She held you. She loved you. And no one ever told us who she was." They turned the photo over. In faint ink, barely legible, Ruth, 1995. Summer, keep safe, Ruth. A name, a beginning. Because sometimes, all it takes is one frozen frame in time to melt the past wide open. Grief doesn't just bury the dead, it buries the living too. The late afternoon Alabama sun filtered through stained glass as Nina and Xavier sat across from an old man named Elijah Carter, one of the few still alive who had known their father in his youth. They'd found him through Mama Rose, who whispered his name like a prayer and a warning. Elijah's hands trembled as he poured sweet tea. His voice was gravel softened by sorrow. "You want to know why your daddy left?" he asked, eyes darting to the porch as if ghosts might be listening. It wasn't just secrets, it was fire. They listened in silence. He used to work at that textile mill on Mason Creek. Barely made enough to feed 3 mouths. But he was proud. Too proud to ask for help. Elijah leaned in, eyes glossy. Then came the night of the fire. It wasn't in the papers. They kept it hush. "See, your daddy pulled 3 workers from the blaze. Saved their lives. But he couldn't get to the last one." Xavier stiffened. "Who was it?" Elijah swallowed hard. Ruth. Nina's breath hitched. "The woman in the photograph. She didn't die in the fire," Elijah added quickly. "But she was hurt, real bad. Left with burns, lungs never right again. And your father, he blamed himself. Said it was his fault for taking her there that night. She was pregnant with you." Xavier's lips parted. No sound came out. "He didn't walk out on y'all because he stopped loving you," Elijah said. "He left because every breath he took reminded him of who he couldn't save, and how one decision split his life in half." Silence stretched like smoke dot. Sometimes, tragedy is in one moment, tit's a chain of them, one spark, and then everything changes. In the end, it's not the blood alone that binds us, it's the stories we choose to share. The hospital courtyard was bathed in golden afternoon light, leaves rustling gently like whispered memories. Nina stood near the very spot where she'd first donated, blood a small plaque shining faintly beneath her feet. Around her, Xavier and Layla smiled, their faces soft with relief and hope. Devin, now steadier, watched from the sidelines, a faint smile breaking through years of pain. They had come full circle. Years of secrets, lies, and silence had given way to stories shared in daylight. Stories that carried sorrow, yes, but also healing and love. Nina took a deep breath. This place, this moment, it's where everything started, where blood was given and life was saved. Not just his, but mine, ours. Xavier nodded. It's more than a reunion. It's a legacy. We're not just siblings by chance, we're partners in rewriting our family's story. Layla, clutching a small book of poems she'd finally shared with them, looked around. For the first time, I feel whole. Not because of the past, but because of the future we're building. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that stretched like promises. They stood together, three pieces of a whole, bound by blood and choice, ready to face what came next. Because sometimes the deepest wounds become the strongest roots, and sometimes the blood between us is the bridge home. Greeted them with wary eyes. She'd been there the night Ruth gave Bertha, night wrapped in pain, hope, and promises made in whispers. Gladys spoke softly, but with conviction. Your father loved them all, but some choices, well, they broke him. She told stories of secret meetings, of whispered deals made to protect the children from a world that wouldn't understand. You have to decide, Gladys said, her gaze piercing. Do you want to bury the past, or let it shape your future? The siblings exchanged glances. Their journey was far from over. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows as a woman stepped off the bus, her silhouette familiar yet changed by time. Mama Rose, soft-spoken but fierce, had come back into their lives, carrying years of silence like a heavy cloak. She didn't seek forgiveness. She sought understanding. I did what I thought was best, she confessed, voice cracking. Separated, you all to protect you, from a world too cruel to bear the whole truth. Her eyes searched Nina's and Xavier's, pleading for something more than judgment. In that moment, the siblings realized the story wasn't just about secrets. It was about survival. The late afternoon, Alabama sun filtered through stained glass, as Nina and Xavier sat across from Elijah Carter, one of the few who knew their father's youth. His story was one of heroism and tragedy. He told them about the mill fire that changed everything the night their father risked everything, but lost more than anyone knew. Ruth, the woman in the photograph, had survived, but was scarred, both in body and soul. Their father's guilt and pain had driven a wedge between past and present, love and loss. Sometimes the past burns so hot it leaves only ashes behind at their father's grave. Nina laid a hand on the cold stone, feeling the weight of years pressing down. Forgive me, Father, she whispered, for the things left unsaid, for the secrets kept. Xavier stood beside her, eyes closed, searching for answers in the quiet earth. The past wasn't just a chain, it was a chance to break free. As the wind stirred the leaves, it carried with it a promise of healing, fragile but real. Returning to Atlanta, Xavier felt the eyes of the press on him arising. Star-in-law now tangled in a family saga that threatened his career. Rumors swirled, questions flew, but Xavier stood firm, refusing to let the shadows of his past define his future. Nina watched him navigate the storm with quiet strength, realizing family wasn't just about blood, it was about fighting for each other. Devon's world was cracking. Old habits clawed back. Alcohol, anger, regret. Nina saw the man she loved buried beneath years of pain and poor choices. But she also saw hope, a fragile flicker in the darkness. She reached out, even when he pushed away, believing that even broken glass could reflect light. Because family was messy, raw, imperfect, and sometimes that was enough. The family gathered around the worn oak dining table, the air thick with years of unspoken words and fractured trust. Nina, Xavier, Devon, and Layla faced each other, finally ready to confront the secrets that had haunted them. Voices trembled, but didn't break as each confession spilled out pain. Betrayal and love tangled together in raw, messy threads. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't clean, but it was honest, and in that honesty, the first cracks of healing appeared. Nina found herself mentoring a young nurse named Jasmine Bright, eager and full of hope. Seeing Jasmine reminded her of herself, years ago, full of dreams, but unsure of her path. As she guided Jasmine through the challenges of the hospital, Nina realized that healing wasn't just about medicine, it was about passing on strength. In Jasmine's eyes, Nina saw the future she'd fought so hard to claim, and with every lesson, she chose to keep moving forward. Devin took his first steps toward healing, not just from addiction, but from the wounds that had shaped him. Support groups, therapy, late-night talks with Nina H. Moment chipped away at the armor he'd built. Around his heart, the path wasn't easy. It was littered with setbacks and doubt. But for the first time in years, hope wasn't just a word. It was a promise. A ping from a DNA website startled Nina late one night. A new match, Layla, a sister. Neither Nina nor Xavier had known existed until now. Her profile was sparse, poet, guarded, reluctant. Inviting her into their fractured family would be a challenge, but one they were willing to face. Because family was bigger than blood alone. Layla's first meeting with Nina and Xavier was tenser walls high, her trust thin. She spoke in poetry and riddles, hiding pain behind carefully chosen words. But as the siblings shared stories and memories, Layla began to let fragments of herself fall away. The journey toward connection was just beginning. And sometimes, the hardest hearts held the deepest love. Nina, Xavier, and Layla sat in the quiet living room of Nina's apartment, the soft hum of the city outside barely penetrating their fragile bubble. The three siblings had come together after months of cautious meetings, hesitant smiles, and shared silences. Now, surrounded by photos, letters, and memories, they tried to piece together a history that had been fractured for decades. Layla's voice was soft, but certain as she recited a poem she had written about loss and finding, about roots that grew in unexpected soil. Nina felt the weight of years melt away with every word, Xavier's hand resting gently on her shoulder, a silent vow of solidarity. This was not the family they had dreamed of, but it was the family they had found. Three distinct pieces, jagged and imperfect, finally shaping something whole. They weren't just siblings, they were survivors, connected not only by blood, but by a shared determination to build something new from the ruins. The room felt lighter, as if the past's heavy shadows were finally receding. And in that quiet space, the siblings dared to hope for forgiveness, for love, for a future that no secret could tear apart. The grand ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and soft, golden light as Xavier's law firm hosted their annual Blood Gala fundraiser dedicated to blood donation awareness. It was a night of glamour, speeches, and silent auctions. But beneath the polished veneer, tension simmered. Sembered Xavier moved through the crowd with practiced ease, but every whispered rumor and sideways glance reminded him of the fragile balance between his personal revelations and public image. Someone had tipped off the press about his family's complicated story, and whispers threatened to turn into headlines. Nina watched from the sidelines, her nurse's heart aching at the thought of their private lives being splashed across newspapers. Layla stayed close, her usual guardedness replaced by quiet resolve. The gala spotlight wasn't just on charity that night. It was on the siblings' courage to face their past in full view of the world. As Xavier stepped to the podium to speak, the weight of their story became a call to others struggling with identity and connection. The blood between them wasn't just a biological fact, it was a symbol of survival, hope, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Layla sat alone in her apartment, the soft glow of a desk lamp illuminating the pages of her mother's last poem. The words were raw and beautiful, a final confession of love and sorrow, written in a hand that trembled. With hope and regret as she read, tears slipped quietly down her cheeks. For years, Layla had kept her pain locked behind carefully crafted verses, refusing to let anyone inside. But now, holding this poem, she felt the walls around her heart begin to crumble. She reached for her phone and called Nina and Xavier. "Want to share this with you." That night, at a small open mic, Layla stepped onto the stage and read aloud the poem that had haunted her family's history. Her voice wavered but grew stronger with each line, the audience captivated by the unfiltered emotion. For the first time, Layla let her story be heard not as a secret, but as a melody unchained, a voice finally free. The siblings gathered under the wide oak tree in their mother's old neighborhood, the air thick with the scent of magnolias and memory. It was her birthday, a day they'd never celebrated together until now. They shared stories and laughter, tears mingling with smiles as they honored a woman who had held their fractured family together in ways no one had fully understood. They released balloons, each carrying a written wish for healing, connection, and peace. For Nina, Xavier, and Layla, this was more than a reunion, it was a homecoming, a chance to lay down old burdens and embrace the future. Together, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with soft hues of pink and gold, they stood united, a